just enjoyed an interesting video on millennials in the workplace. It's on YouTube. Not going to go into more detail than that. I have, so far, I'm doing a run of 3. I have 2 mummified paddle bows. Deer Rawhide is put on, and I've gotten my shiny new gauze placed on it, mummy fashion, holding the rawhide down. As I said in the past, on rawhide backing bows, if you have thin rawhide, well-prepared rawhide, you don't necessarily need to wrap them to keep the rawhide on. As you get into thicker rawhides, especially calf or sanded down cow rawhide, definitely go with an ace bandage, something that's really heavy duty as far as keeping the stuff down. The deer rawhide that I get from Pine Hollow Longbows from Mike the Man Yancey is very well prepared, degreased for the most part, sanded so it's flat and uniform. It's beautiful stuff. I bought 12 strips, 2 per piece on each bow, so I can do 6 bows. I still have to go through and match them as best as possible. I mean, they're close, but I like to have on one limb the same thickness and the same pull as on the other limb. It helps tailoring. Helps the tailoring issue. Now yesterday, previously, I made every attempt to do a video of me doing a complete rawhide job, but it takes me a little more than a half an hour from start to finish, which finish includes the point where I can put it on my tripod here, and I wound up, I don't know, yapping a little too much. I'll get started here. What I also want to impart on you is a little bit of the medicinal quality of plants. Bow makers, people involved in the primitive arts, whether or not you just enjoy making bows, but then you're out building survival shelters and practicing how to start fires with a hand drill. We're multifaceted, and all of it should include our study and our building up our skills in working stone, as in, say, the points or knives or what have you, making the bits for the spindle drill, the thing that has that round weight on it, and the cross piece and the cordage that goes down. So a pump drill. Rather, we should always have plants in the back of our mind. Now yesterday when I did my medicinal edible plant walk, the people that came were more interested in the medicinal properties of plants and identification and uses over, say, we're going to go out in the woods and forage and learn what kind of plants to eat. And so I pushed the medicinal value of it. Delivery systems. Well, first of all, medicinal plants. I might as well work while I'm doing this. You can cover a few different things. You know, if you look at it, I'm just going to lay this on here. It's get the wood a little wet. Oh yeah, these things stretched out nicely. I'll hold this up. See, I trim this to the length of the bow in the profile of the bow. You can see how much it stretched. That's good. So when it dries, it'll shrink back and impart a little bit of, let us say, pre-stress to the system. Where was I? What was I talking about? Oh, medicinal plants. Suppose you just lived off pizza and RC Cola or Dr. Pepper or whatever. Your body isn't getting the nutrition it needs. And so in a way, medicinal plants can count those plants that have calcium and protein and folic acid and various nutritional compounds, so the medicine is curing you that way, giving your body what it needs. I'm going to leave this other half in here so it doesn't dry out. On the other end, there are plants that contain compounds such as Monarda with thuol that can battle Candida, Echinacea, which is antibacterial and also helps boost your immune system in other ways. And so as I do this, I'm just going to give you a little idea. I'm going to only size this a side at a time. This damp stuff, it put out where it needs. Usually I'll have a little cup of soapy water here, but to help the glue soak in. The reason I only size 1/2 of the bow at a time is because when I lay that first strip of rawhide on here and I'm applying glue to the rawhide, I'm going to flop it over on this side, and I don't want to get glue on the back side of the rawhide, the visible side. I pay particular attention while I'm doing this, getting the edges. You know, the middle part, it's necessary to have glue there, but what's really critical is having your edges secure so they don't peel up. So I am very careful in rubbing the sizing on here to get it down on the edges. Now Titebond, I use Titebond 2. You can use Titebond 3 if you live in a humid environment. I use Titebond 2 because it's not incredibly humid. I also use hide glue. If you get it on the edges, and when it dries, the Titebond will be kind of brown, change the color of the wood. But when you sand the edges, that disappears. I shall make a note that when I'm using something like Helmsman spar urethane, which doesn't make dye run, if I'm doing a painted job and a dye job and I use the Master Aero dyes that I buy at Pine Hollow Longbows on here, if I was to use like some things like the Ultimate Floor Finish by Minwax, which is a urethane, it'll cause the dye to run, which will ruin my patterns. Whereas Helmsman spar urethane does not cause the dyes to run. So I can have intricate patterns painted and dyed, Master Aero dye, and then follow it up with Helmsman spar urethane, and for some reason it doesn't cause any ill to happen on my dye pattern. It's safe. I can take my foam brush and coat it with the spar urethane. Doesn't affect the dye. That's a good thing. Now, if I don't use Helmsman spar urethane, if it's going to be a more natural type of system, I use hide glue and used rawhide over the wood, and I'm just going to grease it or something so it's a primitive finish. Then I won't sand and bevel the edges because I want to make sure the edges kind of go over the edge of the bow and grip really well. So I'm not going to monkey with the edges if I'm not going to seal it down with some kind of urethane or polyurethane. There we go. Don't tell anyone. Anyway, medicinal plants. French press. Look at this. Cup of coffee. Invigorating. Bad cup of coffee, but it still works. Make sure I get the right side down here. Is that a tea, a solution, an infusion, a decoction? And I'm not sticking it down yet. I'm just keeping that glue damp. Something in a liquid form, a tincture which uses alcohol, that creates a good delivery system for these compounds. And so while I do this, talk a little bit about this. Yesterday, for my demonstration, I showed my visitors, my guests, my students as it were, the taste of these teas. I had 5. I had sage, common sage, cooking sage, a lot of sages. You know, if you've seen my video on the juniper cedar debacle, hang on to your shorts, man, because the sage salvia issue, the mint, that is incredibly complex and confusing because the people that named some of these things messed us all up. In fact, let's take white sage for example. I'm not going to go off on too much of a tangent. White sage. There's also another plant called white sage. White sage itself, the ceremonial sage, the stuff that grows in hotter, drier climates. Old man sage is another name for it. You know, you get confused. Sagebrush and stuff. Some of these are different, but they share the same names. There's also another plant, silver king, which is an artemisia, which is called white sage. You know, so you have to be careful. So in this case, I'm just going to talk about the medicinal qualities of cooking sage. Plain old common sage. Green sage. Not going to say it. Scientific name. It's a calming effect. Anyway, I made a tea out of that. Not to confuse you too much over naming of sages. Typically all sages are salvias, and all salvias are in the mint family. Monarda, Monarda fasciculosa, and Monarda didyma. You know, bee balm, horse mint, wild bergamot, that kind of stuff. Which contains thuol, which can battle candida. English lavender, which isn't native, but it grows here, so why not use it? It's a very relaxing thing, has a flowery taste, very pleasant. And English lavender, I'm getting the air bubbles out. Oh, get those air bubbles out. English lavender also helps to flavor these things, so you can make Monarda tea, which is pretty strong, and then just blend it in with a little bit of English lavender or other lavenders, the flowers. You know, and the leaves too, but the flowers typically. I'm going to tip this over to the side so when I'm smearing glue on the rawhide, and you notice I'm not putting glue on the rawhide after I did a quick sizing. I'm not putting the glue on the bow either. Usually I do this in thirds. Because there's enough glue here. I don't need to like inundate the glue. I don't need to like put my rawhide on when I do it and then squish the glue out. If you're squishing glue out, you put too much glue on it. Monarda. Research that. Also used yarrow. Yarrow is good. It has a lot of good things in it, so research yarrow. I'm not going to sit up here. Whoa. This stuff really... Sometimes the deer hide... This is going to go way over the edges. I trimmed it. Make sure I've got silver center. I'm going to creep this back here. Sometimes it doesn't expand width-wise after you soak it. Sometimes it increases greatly. Speed this thing up. Also used echinacea or purple coneflower. What was another one? Mullein. Common mullein. Research common mullein. I'm going to not wrap this right away. I want it to dry a little bit. Secure, so when I'm wrapping it with my gauze, on thin rawhide I can use gauze. If you're using thick stuff, you have to have a much beefier type of wrapping material. So I better concentrate on what I'm doing here. So I've got one limb done. You see it done. You see it's pretty simple. It's kind of foolproof too. As long as you get enough glue on here so you don't have any dry joints. As long as you have the glue on the edges. As long as you wrap it so it's touching. Once you get it wrapped on the edges will dry out faster, and then as long as you don't have any air bubbles in there, you're pretty good. I'll keep going. Put this down here. I want to dampen the wood here, so I'm going to take my strap. Maybe my wife isn't watching, that'll be good. Could use a paper towel, but I don't have one. But consider teas, medicinal plants. Good first step. I'm just going to put this down here. Then I'm going to... Oh, that's weird. This one didn't stretch it out as much, so I'm going to pull this this way. You don't necessarily have to have a great deal of overlap if you have a non-bending handle, but I'd like to have an inch or so. There we go. Especially in the handle. You've got a joint here, and when you sand all this stuff, you want to make sure that it's bound well. Let's see if I got it. Wow. Let's creep this even further. I want to have at least 2 inches of overlap. Sweet. That'll work. Okay, sizing. I need some water on this. It does help to have the wood a little damp when you size it. It helps thin the glue out a little bit. It helps it soak in a little bit. Red oak is a lot easier to deal with when you're gluing stuff to it than, say, Osage or some of these other oily woods. There's a lot of different ways to degrease Osage, mulberry. You do have to have the back roughened up. The backing generally really helps take some of the, or all of the tensional load, some to all of the tensional load, so you don't need to have a super smooth back. There we go. Let's start at this end. Why not? Doesn't matter. Let's see much. I don't want to necessarily permanently glue my gauze on there, so I don't want to go too crazy on this. Want to make sure that there is a good bond where this rawhide joins, because this is going to be a weak part. Rawhide glues much better to wood than it does to other rawhide. Sizing. Guess I can take that off now. Ugh. And what am I paying attention to? The edges. Get a French press. Everyone should have a French press. It's a really good way to create teas. In your research, you'll find that sometimes it's okay to dry things. Like, I don't mind drying the Menardin, other mints, and common mullein, which that's a power plant. It'll do everything except, and some people say it does, reinvigorate follicles and regrow hair. I mean, the stuff, antimicrobial, can kill parasitic protozoans. What else can it do? Anti-malarial. People use it for asthma relief. People use it. It's been shown to actually, and they're working on this, testing it, to activate genes that can fight Alzheimer's disease. It can slow the growth of some cancers, certain cancers. Amazing stuff. There we go. All the way to the end. And when you're working this stuff, hand here, and stretch it out, especially when you're wrapping it with gauze. Now, gauze is nice. Gauze is a very nice material because it's thin. Wow. I almost don't need to add any more glue. My sizing is there. So I will anyway. Along the edges, after you wrap with gauze, if you don't use extremely even pressure throughout your wrap, you're going to cause the rawhide to shift sideways on the ball. Watch that. Nice thing about gauze being thin is you can actually feel your edges, and you can correct them. You can correct your edges. After you wrap it, you're able to some degree, slide your rawhide. Ooh, nice. Because you want to even it. If you have it trimmed right to the edge of the bow, if it shifts, you may in fact find that you have bare spots on the back of the bow. Not good. More visual than anything. Generally, it's not going to ruin the bow, but we try to be very accurate when we make anything. Little glue smearing here. As this glue starts to set up, it'll set up along the edges first and lock it down. And in this way, if you're using Rawhide glue or even Titebond. I'd use Titebond 3 in a very humid area because it's waterproof, whereas Titebond 2 is water resistant. Titebond 3 is a good thing to use. There we go. With hide glue on thin hide, with hide glue, when you're bonding it to a thin hide, all you need to do is just fuss with it. The edges will dry down, and then the rest will follow suit. It'll dry drum tight. You don't need to wrap it. However, I want to get that excess glue up there before I wrap it. And so, friends, in conclusion, I'm going to let this set up a little bit before I wrap it. In that way, it's not going to be so susceptible to like shifting. I shall let you go. I'm going to wash my hands before I wrap it because I've got glue fingers. I'm going to say thank you for watching my videos. I will add that I have 12 strips from Mike, 6 bows. The 3 that you see here, the 2 mummies, and then this one that's going to be a mummy, are heavier, above 50 pounds. I suspect one is going to be like 62. They'll be fully painted, finished with Helmsman spar urethane. Beautiful, beautiful creatures. The next 3 that I make with my strips are going to be between 40 and 50 pounds, so I'll have 6 bows that range greatly. As far as the pricing, I am going to stick. I'm going to honor the $145 that I said I would sell 3 bows to the people that I committed to that price. Otherwise, they're going to have to be $165 a piece. The price of rawhide has gone up, so you're looking at just $40 in materials, the wood and the rawhide, and the extraneous things. $40 just in materials, and so when you consider the work that goes into it, $165 plus shipping, that leaves $125 by my calculations. A pure unadulterated profit, you know, in the time-wise, I think that's fair. I think that's fair. I'm not going to gouge people because now I have a little more notoriety for being a columnist and an author of articles in Primitive Archer magazine, which everyone should get. Support Primitive Archer. It's a relatively small community, so it needs our help to just survive. It's not like Hot Rod magazine or Sports Illustrated. You know, this is a somewhat small community. And now with that, I'm going to wash my hands and wrap. I can see that this is starting to dry to the point. Have a great day, and thank you for watching.